Thank you for including our company once again in your conference. We look forward to sharing the company's updates as we've made some significant changes in progress to our strategy and business model since we last presented to your conference. So as Tony said, Rakovina Therapeutics is in the cancer space. The name Rakovina means cancer in Czech and some other Eastern European languages, which is my background. So we are very much focused on the development of new cancer therapeutics. We, as Tony said, are leveraging a novel artificial intelligence platform to enhance our drug discovery efforts. And we believe that this gives us a leg up on the competition to find the next best-in-class drug candidates to advance toward clinical trials that are going to make a big difference for patients. So when we started the company in 2021, we were a very traditional drug discovery and lead optimization sort of platform, the kind of thing that my partners and I have been doing for well over 20 years. And as you're well aware, the traditional drug discovery process is very expensive, it's high risk, and it takes a long time. And the chances of finding the right drug candidate to bring to clinical trials is a challenge. Earlier this year, we had an opportunity to do something that I believe is game-changing by partnering with a professor at the University of British Columbia who has a well-validated AI platform, artificial intelligence platform for drug discovery. Art Cherkasov, our partner, is one of the, if not the top medicinal chemists for AI drug discovery in the world. And his platform, called Deep Docking, is well validated with multiple products already in clinical trials that we are now using exclusively for the DNA damage response targets that we are interested in. Our company, we don't consider ourselves an AI company. The star of the show, what will derive value for shareholders and make a difference for patients, are the drug candidates that are identified from the AI. And we have a well-established infrastructure at the University of British Columbia to validate those and then seek partnering to advance to human clinical trials. Now, this timeline is something that many of you have probably seen in the Wall Street Journal, in Forbes, and other business magazines around the world. The drug development and drug discovery is a very long, high risk, and expensive process. But I would argue that if you have the right drug candidate to put into human clinical trials, that once you get to clinical trials, it's a relatively low risk and straightforward regulatory process. The magic is getting to the right drug candidate. And frankly, the deck is stacked against smaller companies in this way because with limited resources, if you imagine that finding the right drug candidate is like looking for a needle in a haystack. If we have limited resources and we're limited to only looking at a small corner of that haystack, the chances of us finding that right drug candidate is diminished, even if we have the best people in the world around our table. And that's why larger companies, big pharmaceutical companies, will spend tens of millions of dollars and much more time to find that right drug candidate. Smaller companies, this is why they're higher risk. This is why they often fail. The AI lets us look at the entire haystack. It not only levels the playing field, but gives us a potential competitive advantage, get ahead of our competitors to find that next best-in-class drug candidate in a very efficient and timely manner. And interestingly, those competitors are the same companies that we will look to partner with, larger companies that are in our same space. So traditional drug development, we have a long process, as you said. The AI on the right-hand side here lets us move very quickly from target validation to having the lead molecules to advance toward clinical trials with partners. So instead of taking 4 to 6 years to get there, we can do this in 9 to 12 months. And we recently made an announcement that we had completed an initial multi-billion compound screen and received the output of that in the form of a short list of validated drug candidates from the computer's perspective. We are now synthesizing those in our laboratory for validation, and we will move those forward toward clinical trials. So this AI collaboration allows us to move very rapidly toward identifying those drug candidates, and they can be very valuable even at a preclinical setting, as I will describe. This platform called deep docking is very well validated. There are multiple products in clinical trials that came out of this deep docking platform. The largest deal, the largest licensing deal that has ever been done by a Canadian university with a big pharmaceutical company is around a drug that came out of this platform. But what really put this on the map was what Professor Cherkasov did during COVID. In the 3 weeks from the time when the first case of COVID was reported in Canada in January of 2020, within 3 weeks, he had screened 1.3 billion antiviral compounds against the COVID virus. He published the top 1,000 hits online as his contribution to a problem that the world was trying to solve. And we know that those programs, that publication, led to multiple development programs at academia and pharma. And we're also aware that that publication, that 1.3 billion molecule screen that was done in just a few weeks, had a direct influence for Pfizer's decision to advance Paxlovid, which was, of course, approved before the end of that year. The robust power of that infrastructure is what we have now exclusive access to for our DNA damage response targets. So a little bit about DNA damage response. So these are systems that exist within our cells to protect us from mutations. Every day we are experiencing either natural mistakes in DNA replication or event-driven mutations, such as if you're outside in a nice sunny day at lunch, you're being affected by UV light, but you're not going to come back to the office with skin cancer. That's because while the damage was happening to your DNA, these systems detect it and repair it simultaneously and seamlessly. It happens tens of thousands of times in our bodies every day. What we also know and what we've learned is that roughly 75%, or 3 out of every 4 cancers, involves a defect in one of those repair systems. And if that defect allows a mutation to sneak through that is involved with cell division or cell growth, eventually a tumor is going to form, and that person is going to become a patient diagnosed with cancer. The fact that we now know this and understand this gives us opportunities to target those mutations that allow the cancer to form with new drug treatments. There are first-generation products on the market called PARP inhibitors, PARP. They're sold by GlaxoSmithKline, Pfizer, and AstraZeneca, some of the biggest companies in the pharmaceutical space in the world. Interestingly, none of those companies invented those drugs. They got them by licensing from or acquiring a smaller company. And that is the space that we are in to develop the next generation of therapies. So what we've done is take a very robust and well-validated AI infrastructure to allow us to more rapidly look at the entire haystack to find the needle that we're looking for, the right drug candidate, the best-in-class drug candidate that we can move toward clinical trials. And we can do this in a very timely manner. We announced in our quarterly that in 3 months, we had screened 1.5 billion drug candidates against our target. And a couple of weeks ago, we announced the receipt of the screen that was even bigger than that, more than 3 billion compounds, a short list that we're now validating in our laboratories. And to put this into perspective, to screen 3 billion plus compounds, if I had a team of 1,000 chemists working full time, it would take them more than 30,000 years to accomplish what the AI platform has done in just a few months. It would be impossible. So this is why we believe this will be game-changing for patients and investors. So our portfolio looks like this. 3283 is a lead molecule that was derived from the original platform, the original approach to drug discovery before we had the AI on board. And we're very happy with that drug. It took 4 years and $4 million to get there, but it's now being formulated toward clinical trials and will likely partner that soon. The 2000 series, which is also focused on PARP, the same target that the leading products or the first generation products are focused on. We have just completed and just announced a multi-billion drug screen toward a new generation, better product in the PARP space. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. In addition, we recently announced a second AI collaboration with a company called Variational AI, also based in Vancouver. Variational's expertise is in certain types of targets in cells called kinases. They're basically on-off switches for pathways in cells. And it just so happens that several of the DNA damage response pathways and targets that we are interested in are kinases. And so leveraging their expertise made all the sense in the world. And in fact, both Mads Daugaard, who's the president and chief scientific officer of Rakovina, and Professor Cherkasov, who's the inventor of the deep docking platform that we originally partnered with, are advisors to Variational AI. So the collaboration with them made a lot of sense, and we will be announcing shortly the receipt of some drug candidates from them. So we've recently completed a multi-billion compound screen. We are now synthesizing those drug candidates with our partner called PharmInventor in Vancouver. They're our chemistry partner. We will bring those into our laboratories, the University of British Columbia, where we have the cell therapy, the cell assays, the animal models, the toxicology models, everything we need to validate that these drug candidates are ready to move toward clinical trials. And we'll take that data and look at partnering with large pharma companies. And those partnerships can be quite lucrative. So our first target, let's talk about that for a second. So in the first generation, the PARP inhibitors that are sold, as I said, by GSK, Pfizer, and AstraZeneca, it's a class of drugs that will do about $3.5 billion in sales this year. They've become game-changing in the treatment of certain types of breast, ovarian, and prostate cancer. But just like any new technology, when it comes to the market, it's earth-shattering, it's game-changing, it's paradigm-shifting. But then you start to learn about how you might be able to do better. And in this case, there are some side effects associated with the first-generation drugs, and they lack the ability to cross the blood-brain barrier. And that's important because roughly half of the patients with breast cancer who are being treated with these first-generation drugs will develop CNS or brain metastases where the cancer is spreading to their brain during the course of their treatment. We can't do anything about that right now. So a couple of years ago, AstraZeneca, who's the leader in the field, said, we believe we can solve the side effect problem by focusing on one subset of the PARP enzyme family. There are actually 11 PARP enzymes in the body, and they have a new drug that focuses just on PARP1. And it looks wonderful. It will likely be approved by the FDA in the next 18 months. The data is very, very nice. I've seen it in presentations. And at that same meeting where they presented their data, there were 8 other companies that were chasing that product with a PARP1 specific drug. Also at that meeting, AstraZeneca came out and said, we have a second generation plus, a PARP1 specific drug that will have fewer side effects that can also cross the blood-brain barrier. And as I said, that is critical for the treatment of those breast cancer patients. And AstraZeneca has already shown that if you have a $2 billion a year drug, which they do, and you can evolve it so that it now treats the cancer that spreads to the brain, that is a $5 billion potential product. They did this in lung cancer several years ago. They're doing the same thing with their PARP inhibitor program here today with their next generation product. So that is what we are also doing. We have trained the AI to seek a best-in-class drug candidate that will be competitive with the new AstraZeneca product. And the AI is also trained to say, find us drug candidates that are not in anybody else's patents. There's 35 years plus worth of research here that we have used to train that AI. So now we have that short list of drug candidates. We're making them. We're moving them into our laboratories. and we're testing them. So our timelines look something like this. We started the process and the project with deep docking AI in the spring. 2 weeks ago, we announced the receipt of the initial output from the AI. We're now synthesizing those for validation in our laboratories. We do have a presentation at the Society for Neuro-Oncology meeting in 2 weeks, where we're going to present the initial data. It's obviously not going to be the whole data package. It's still early days, but this is the kind of data that we are using to get the attention of the pharmaceutical partners that we want to work with to bring these to clinical trials. And those partnerships can be quite significant. What we've seen in this space, in the DNA damage response field, is multiple marquee level transactions for preclinical drug candidates. We're talking about licensing deals that are worth more than $1 billion US, with very substantial, often more than $100 million in non-dilutive cash up front. That's the kind of deal that we believe that we can potentially achieve in the second half of next year. We would look to take that initial capital and use it to build out our infrastructure and become a company that can go after multiple targets with the AI as a platform, validation in our laboratories, and seeking additional partnerships toward moving toward clinical trials. So we've got a great team around us. My background is actually biophysics, but I've been building companies for a long time. Mads Daugaard, who is the president and chief scientific officer of Rakovina Therapeutics, is an expert in DNA damage response and someone who I've worked with for well over 10 years. Before we started Rakovina Therapeutics, Mads was my go-to guy for asking, how does a drug work in a cell? How does it bind to DNA? What targets does it hit? That's his expertise, and that's why he's leading this company. When we were looking at forming Rakovina Therapeutics, we asked Mads, Professor Daugaard, to do some due diligence for us on some of the assets that we were looking at. And he got very excited and said, hey, can I be part of this? Can we do this in my lab? So we worked it out with UBC, so we have access to a wonderful infrastructure and a dedicated team in his lab. I've talked about Professor Cherkasov a bit with the deep docking platform, but on our scientific advisory board, we do have some very notable people as well, namely Petra Hammerlich. Petra was previously the head of the DNA damage response programs at AstraZeneca. They are the leader in the field. Their product on the market was her project. Their second generation product, their phase 2 clinical trial was called the Petra trial. They named it after her. It was her project. And so having the leader or former leader of the leader in the field at our table with all of that in-house knowledge is very valuable to us. Len Post is also responsible for one of the 3 first-generation PARP inhibitors that are on the market. His drug, called talazoparib, he had that at a company called Lead Therapeutics. He went to BioMarin, and then went to a company called Medivation, which Pfizer acquired for $14 billion. So we have some great expertise around our table. In the last couple of seconds here, we'll talk about the cap table. We have about 90 million shares outstanding. The majority of those are held, or a big chunk of those, I should say, about 27%, are held by a private US company called Edison Oncology, which I and one of our other board members control. Other SETI insiders take that number up to about 40%. But in that 62% of retail and institutional, there are a couple of multi-billion family offices that control over 9% and a number of other big block holders. So the true float for Rakovina Therapeutics is probably between 25 and 30 million shares. So that's really the story. We have a very large market where the first generation products have just barely scratched the surface. We're leveraging what we believe is a world leading AI platform to change the game in drug discovery, level the playing field, and give us a potential competitive advantage to get to those next best in class drug candidates in a very competitive field. We can validate those in our labs at the University of British Columbia, and the partnering opportunities are quite robust. So we were lucky to be selected as a top 10 biotech company, undervalued company by the Globe and Mail in Vancouver a few weeks ago. You can click on that QR code if you'd like to read that article. It was a surprise to us, but we were very proud of that. So that's really the story. Happy to take any questions. We're very proud of what we put together, and this is going to be an exciting year ahead.
First is that for the DDR inhibitors market, you said a project to reach 18 billion in the next decade. Is the company currently exploring partnerships with major pharmaceutical firms to accelerate DDR drug launch?
That's absolutely that is 100% our business model. So we are looking at developing products that we know the big pharmaceutical companies are interested in. All of the big pharmaceutical companies, all 20 of them, have a very robust DDR research program. And so we are looking to bring to them the kinds of things that they're looking for in a best-in-class format and partner and unlock the value early to accelerate their development.
One last question is that how does the company address potential risks in AI-driven drug development, such as safety of AI-selected candidates?
So that's one of the wonderful things about working with a platform like DeepDoc, and that it's been so well validated and used for so many years. It's evolved, it's gotten better and better over time. But when it's trained, it already knows how to look at a safety profile, how to look at metabolic profile, how to look at pharmacokinetics. So in addition to looking at the targets that we're interested in, it has all of that knowledge as well. And like I said, there are multiple products in clinical trials that came out of this platform. And the largest deal that's ever been done by a Canadian biotech company, or excuse me, by a Canadian university with a big pharmaceutical company came out of this platform. So we're very, feel very lucky and blessed to be working with Professor Cherkasov and have exclusive access to that platform for our DDR targets.